We have to go back to 1840. A gentleman by the name of Horatio Spencer Wills settled at the base of a small mountain or a tall hill, whichever way you like to look at it, a little way west of here, and he named that mountain Mount Ararat because he said, like the ark, we rested there. Obviously a student of the Bible was Horatio Spencer Wills. He was a squatter, and so he had a couple of hundred sheep and a wife and a few kids wandering along behind him, and he settled at Mount Ararat, and that sort of gave the district its name. Now, as a matter of historic interest, by the way, his son, Tom Wills, is the man who's credited with creating Australian rules football. The romantic story is that Tom, as a boy, used to watch the Aboriginals play a game which involved chasing a possum skin stuffed with dried grass over a vast area of land. And they firmly believe that he got the basic ideas for Australian rules football from watching that game. I don't know whether that's true or not, but it's a good story. I like it. We might as well go along with it. The colony of Victoria was proclaimed in 1851, of course. Just 3 years later, 1854, gold was discovered at Pinky Point, which is a little spot in the Ararat Hills out here, about 10 kilometres out. And from that gold strike, the town of Cathcart grew. And Cathcart, at its peak, had a population of about 15,000 people. It was really quite a town. There's now nothing there at all. It's hard to believe that a town could just completely disappear. But when the gold ran out, so did Cathcart. And as a matter of historic interest also, the first Victorian policeman killed in the line of duty was shot at Cathcart. That was Sergeant John McNally. And he was shot while trying to arrest a bushranger who no one's ever heard of, called Gypsy Smith. Gypsy and his mate shot the good sergeant, and they got away at the time. But you'll be pleased to hear they caught up with them later on. Now, in May or June of 1857, depending on which history books you read, we're told that a party of 700 Chinese were on their way from Robe in South Australia, heading for the goldfields at Clunes near Ballarat. And the reason they're on their way from Robe in South Australia is, in those days, the Chinese were not welcome in the colony of Victoria. In fact, there was a £10 a head tax on them to come into the colony. And even if they were prepared to pay that exorbitant sum, it didn't mean that they were allowed in because the numbers were restricted as well. So the ship's masters, to overcome that problem, would take them on to the first available port outside Victoria, and that was Robe in South Australia. They would put them ashore there, give them a packet of Vegemite sandwiches and say, Victoria is that way, off you go. And they would walk from Robe in South Australia to whichever goldfields they're heading for in Victoria. That's a hell of a long walk. It's a long enough drive, let alone a walk. And there were no roads, they were just following the tracks of the previous people through. And I believe quite a few did perish out of the 15,000 odd who put ashore at Robe over the years. But we're told that this particular group made it here quite safely. We're also told that they stopped nearby here for a lunch break. Obviously McDonald's had seen the potential of this area and built a store just over the way here. And while they were eating their chop suey burgers, they took their billies down to a creek to fill with water to make a cup of tea. But we're told they didn't fill them with water, they filled them with gold nuggets. What they had actually discovered was the world's richest shallow alluvial goldfield. Literally tons of gold came out of what was to become the Ararat diggings. Needless to say, the Chinese said, oh, this will do us, we're not going any further. But they didn't register their claim and they didn't announce their strike, which you had to do by law. They kept it to themselves. And they were only sprung when they tried to buy goods at Cathcart using gold that they dug up here on the Ararat fields. Once it became common knowledge, the European miners turned up here in their thousands, and newspaper reports of the day claim that within 3 months of it becoming common knowledge, there was something like 50,000 miners all frantically digging holes all around what was to become the city of Ararat. The government of the colony decided 50,000 miners, by golly, there's bound to be some bad habits amongst them. They felt they should build a county jail here on the Ararat fields. So they made that decision that first year, apparently, 1857. Work commenced in 1859 and it was completed in 1862 at a cost of £24,000. It's built from bluestone, which was quarried locally about 8 to 10 kilometres south of here, and it's based on the Pentonville design, which was the model prison of its time in London. The walls are about 6 metres high, as you can see, and apparently the foundations go down a similar sort of depth, because quite a few years ago some gas company employees were trying to bring a gas pipeline into the place, and they thought rather than drill through the walls, which are pretty thick as you can imagine, they decided they would go underneath. Well, apparently they went down about 3 or 4 metres and gave up in disgust. They said the damn walls go down forever. So obviously whoever built the place intended A, no one would ever dig their way out, bearing in mind they'd have miners in here, I suppose, and B, the walls should never fall over, the foundations are just too solid. The gold ran out in the 1880s, the population of Ararat fell away to 2,000 people, or under 2,000 people. The jail population fell away as well, of course, and it closed as a jail in 1886, so it wasn't open as a jail all that long. However, at that time, the lunacy department, as it was known, were looking for somewhere to house the criminally insane. Now, these were people who had committed major crimes, very often murder, but were judged to be of unsound mind. They were looking for somewhere to house these people. Now, I believe most of Victoria said, not in our backyard, thank you very much. But Ararat already had the mental hospital over here by then, so I guess the good citizens of Ararat thought, what the hell's another one to us? So in 1887, as a temporary measure, and I underline temporary, it became J Ward, the hospital for the criminally insane. It closed in 1991, so that's how temporary it was, a typical government temporary arrangement. The building we've just come out of was the jail governor's residence, and when that was built, that would have been the finest residence in Ararat, as you can imagine. There were 4 governors during the life of the jail, and their wives automatically became the jail matrons, because in those days, women and children were kept in the jail here as well. I just wanted to impress upon you that this place had 2 completely separate lives. Up until 1886, it was a jail. From 1887 through till 1991, it was a hospital for the criminally insane. So you just have to bear that in mind as we go through, because we do swap back and forth a bit with stories. Okay, we'll head off. We'll take the scenic route. We'll go this way. Now, I do like to stop here for a start, just to show folks this photo. There is a larger version of it inside, which you can have a look at later, and you won't all be able to have a look at it at once, so have a look at it as you come past. But it shows you the way the yard looked around about the turn of the 19th century. So obviously there was a gravel path from the gates right up to the main cell block up here. Those red brick extensions weren't here, of course. Originally, you can see from this photo, there were 2 wing walls that came off the main cell block in an L shape. One to this corner here, the other to this corner over here. And that effectively separated the living area here from the jail area over there. But sometime after it became J Ward, they pulled those walls down, and then they built that red brick wall around the back of what by then would have been the head nurse's residence, so that he had a private backyard. And that explains why we've got part red brick, part bluestone wall around the back of the governor's residence. While we're here, the gates are not the original gates. For many, many years there was a steel roller door there, but the Friends of J Ward decided that was a pretty rusty, uninteresting looking old thing, and they felt we really should have the original style gates back again. So they had those built. They cost $36,000 at the time. They weren't cheap, but they are a handmade replica of the original gates as per the plans we've got. Okay, we'll move along. Just have a look at that photo as you come past. But we're not going very far. Very good. Now, this building, which is a sort of mirror image of the governor's residence over here, this was the warders' quarters back in the jail days. The warders actually used to live on site, and they were allocated rooms in the warders' quarters here to live in. We're told that they were on duty for 13 days out of a 14-day fortnight. So it was a fairly solid sort of a workload. Obviously the unions weren't the strength then that they were in later times. They weren't all that well paid either, but at least they had a roof over their heads. They were fed from the jail kitchen, so I guess they weren't too badly off in the long run. It's now the caretaker's residence, so it's not open to the public. This wall immediately in front of us here intrigues me no end, because it's the site of the only jail break-in that I think I've ever heard of. Back in November 1880, a bloke by the name of Andrew McMillan stole a ladder from somebody, put it up against the outside wall, climbed up, put the ladder down this side, climbed down. This is in the evening, of course. He walked into the warders' quarters there. They weren't locked because they felt fairly safe in here. He let himself into the rooms of one Warder Barr, B-A-R-R. Warder Barr was on duty that night, and it turned out later this was actually a bit of an inside job. But he fossicked around in Warder Barr's rooms for a while, and he came out with 7 £5 notes, 3 £1 notes, a gold chain, and a bottle of whiskey, which wasn't a bad haul back in November 1880, believe me. £38, a gold chain, and a bottle of whiskey. That was a very, very good night's work. But it was the bottle of whiskey which brought him undone. And let that be a lesson to you young people. Whiskey does you no good at all. When the police raided his rooms, and they must have had a rough idea who they were looking for, they found the whiskey bottle. And they said, this is the one that was stolen from the warder's quarters at the jail. You're it. And he spent 3 years here at Her Majesty's pleasure for that little act. So the moral of the story is keep off the whiskey, or drink it before you leave the premises. The missing piece of tapping stone up there has a story too. Everything in J Ward has a story. Back around the turn of the 19th century, a group of volunteers were working on enlarging the Alexander Gardens, which are just across the way here. And they came across this outcrop of rock, which they thought they would shift by blasting. So apparently they invited some of the old miners in to give them a hand, because the old miners knew a bit about blasting. But the old miners must have lost their touch somewhere along the line, because apparently they overdid the black powder, and the resulting explosion shook the whole town and shook that piece of tapping stone loose in the process. That was a solid piece of stone from the outside edge right through to the centre of the arch, but obviously there was a fault in the stone. The explosion revealed the fault and down she came. It was too hard to put back up again, so it's been down ever since. Now, lots of people can see a face in that exposed rock up there. You might have to come around a little bit to see it, but to me it looks like a wolf or a bear or something. I can see 2 eyes, slitty sort of eyes, long nose, tip on the end of the nose. Some people can see a cow. I'm damned if I can see a cow. Some people can't see anything at all. But before you admit to that, I should warn you that this is a sanity test, and if you can't see a face up there, you won't be allowed to leave at the end of the tour. Now, can you all see a face up there? Yes, yep, all right, okay. I detect a doubt in the camp. Well, I'll just have to go and get the admission forms, I'm sorry.
We were hoping.
You were hoping
Yeah, one down.
One down. The rest of you have passed. Well done. Okay, we'll move along. When the mental hospital over here was built, it consisted of wards A through to I, apparently. And when this place became the hospital for the criminally insane, it simply became another ward of the mental hospital, so it became Ward J, the next one. All right. I think it's stopped raining. Probably a good thing. Yeah, that's the governor's backyard over there. We tend not to go there as part of the tour. There's not a great deal in there, but you are welcome to wander in there on your way out at the end of the tour and have a look for yourselves. This was the married warder's quarters. This was allocated to the most senior warder with a family, and he and his wife and children were allocated this palatial 2-room apartment to live in. It literally is just 2 rooms with a sort of pantry thing in the middle. But before you start feeling too sorry for them, there's a record of at least 2 babies being born in there, so they must have some elbow room, right? It's been restored, refurnished, refurbished in the style of the times, so if you'd like to poke your noses in there and see how they used to live, you're most welcome.